Hello students, today we're going to talk about how to round decimals to a given place value. So this is going to be the first page of your notes. So up at the top here, I have a review. This is actually a 5th grade standard, but because we are going to be rounding so much this year, a lot of the problems that you are going to be asked to solve and give an answer, we will be requiring you to round to a certain place value. So we're just going to take a little bit of time today to review how to do that. So to get you guys started, I have the learning target there already. How are decimals rounded to a given place value? And then what I have set up here are some place values, and then here's our decimal point. So this would be a good place in the video to pause, go ahead and record this information that I have, and then go ahead and start playing it again, and we'll continue the rest of the notes together. So what I'm going to do with each of these decimal places here is we are actually going to label them so that we can review place value first, and then we'll get into the rounding. So the period here looking thing, of course, you guys know as the decimal point, actually, if you recall, means and. So I'm going to turn my paper here, and we're going to write this way here for a minute. Okay, so when you see that decimal point in a number, we don't read it as point, we read it as and. So if we work our way in front of that decimal point, we're going to go ahead and label those place values there. So kind of try it with me. I know that I can't hear your responses, but I hope that you guys can remember these. So to the left of that decimal point, we have the ones place, and I'm going to color code these. So I'm actually going to put each one of these in a different color. Okay. And then next we have the tens, and spelling does count here, and you'll see why when we get into the decimal places there. Then we have the hundreds. Okay, so again, check your spelling there. And I'm just going to keep my colors right next to me here because I'm not done with them yet. So I'm going to color code, and then I'm going to keep those colors right there. All right. Then we have the thousands as we're working our way back here. So the thousands place. And then we have the 10,000s place, and we can keep going back and back to the 100,000s place and so on. But we're going to stop there because that's really all I think we need to know this way to review. The important parts are what we're going to be rounding to. So after that decimal point, that's what we really want to focus on. All right, so these are those numbers that are very large here as you're to the left of the decimal point. And then as you go to the right of the decimal point, that's when your numbers are getting very, very small. Okay, so there's no oneths place. But where there is the tens place here, instead of tens, it's tenths with a TH at the end. Okay, so I'm going to grab a new color. So make sure you get that THS ending there at the end. Okay, and then we have the, instead of hundreds, it's hundredths. So you're going to write the word hundred and then put a THS at the end. So hundredths. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and underline those THS endings there. Okay, and then we get into the thousandths place. So you're going to spell the word thousand, again with that THS ending. And then you have the 10,000ths place. I'm jumping ahead of myself here. So then you get the 10,000ths place, again with that THS ending there. Okay, and again, we could continue on and on. So we have the first several place values here for your review. But again, hopefully you guys already knew all of that. So I'm going to turn our paper back over here, and we're just going to go ahead and fill in some digits here. Okay, so if I've got in the ones place, maybe I've got a 1. In the tens, maybe we'll put a 0 here. In the hundreds place, Maybe that's a 2. Whoops, except that should have been in green. Okay, that's a 2. Sorry about that. In the thousands place, let's say we have a 4. In the 10,000s place, let's say we have a 3. Okay, in the tenths place, let's go ahead and put an 8. In the hundredths place, let's go ahead and put a 6. Thousandths place, we'll put a 5. And in the 10,000s place, let's go ahead and put a 9. Okay. So then the next thing I want you to review is how do you actually read this number correctly? Because again, we're not going to say point. I want you to say and. So hopefully, again, you're saying this along with me. I know I can't hear your response. But we would read this number as 34,201 and 8,659 10,000ths would be the correct way to read that, okay? So the only time you say and in that number is at the decimal point. Okay, so just a review there on how to read these decimals properly. All right, so you should have already watched the video on how to round. And in that video, it showed you a little song, a little jingle, who's that knocking on my back door? So I think that's a pretty good way of remembering your rounding rules. So I'm actually gonna include that in our notes. So go ahead and jot that down. Who's that knocking on my back door? Who's that knocking on my back door? Okay. So if you're looking at a number and you ask yourself that, that's where the rounding rules come in. So it goes on to say 5 or more, and then we're going to raise that score. And you might have learned rounding rules a different way in your schooling, and that's okay if you have something else you used to remember. I just like this one the best. All right, so 4 or more, you're gonna or 5 or more, you're gonna raise that score. 4 or less, you are going to leave that mess, which means you're not gonna do anything to that number. Okay, so 5 or more, raise that score. 4 or less, leave that mess. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just kind of color code that. Doesn't matter what colors you're using here. Again, I just like my information to pop off the page so I'm not just looking at a bunch of stuff in pencil. Okay, this makes it stand out as being important. Okay, and just kind of separates it a little bit. Makes it pop off that page. All right. So 5 or more, raise that score. 4 or less, leave that mess. So it works like this, and you guys saw this in the video, and I asked you to practice along. Let's say we start with this number. Okay, again, we're not reading this as 5.06. You should be reading it as 5 and then you have 6 on the hundredths place, so it should read 5 and 6 hundredths, okay? So let's say that we are rounding this number to the nearest tenth, okay? So you're gonna look up here if you need to. You'll see here the tenths place is just to the right of the decimal point. So I'm gonna underline that place right there. I'm actually gonna grab a color. Okay, so we are trying to round to the tenths place, which is right there, okay? So put up a back door. So the back door is going to go up behind that tenths place, behind that 0, okay? If you want to label that, you can. So there's the back door, okay? Who's that knocking on my back door? It's the 6 knocking on the back door of the 0, okay? So 6 is knocking on the back door of the 0. So what do we do with that? Well, you determine is 6, 5 or more. If it is, we're going to raise that score. And what we're going to raise is not the 6, but we're going to raise the 0 because we're rounding to that tenths place. If it's 4 or less, we're going to leave that mess, which means the 0 is just going to stay the same. We're not going to do anything with it. Okay? So the 6 is the one doing the knocking. Okay? I've seen students in the past get kind of confused okay, and they feel like they want to round that 6. You're not rounding the 6. You're rounding the 0, the number in the tenths place, because that's what we're being asked, okay? And then what happens actually is that 6 is going to end up disappearing, okay? It is 5 or more, so we're going to raise this score, okay? So that 0 is actually going to round up to a 1, and your final rounded number is going to be 5 and 1/10. And that's your final answer. And if you want to put a 0 in there as a place marker there, that's totally fine. So you could say 5.10 or 5.1. Either way, they both read 5 and 1/10. So I hope that you found that helpful. If you need to rewind and go back through that again, or if you need to watch the video again on Who's That Knocking on My Back Door for some extra practice, feel free to watch again and rewind and pause as needed. See you guys later.